So we have to go to Maxwell Agbagba.
Yes, so let's go to Maxwell Agbagba now, and he will speak to Alexander Bonkola Williams from the Ghana Federation of the Disabled on why the association has issues with the disbursement of the District Assembly Common Fund. Hello, Maxwell.
Pito, we're taking it over. Yeah, hello, Mapito.
All right, you can do your thing.
Okay, so we're here at the Accra Rehabilitation Center, specifically at a place where we have some offices for persons with disability. And we are here to meet, as you mentioned, Alexander Bankole Williams. He's a spokesperson for the Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations. And you know that they've been raising some concerns about the formula of the District Assembly Common Fund. And we are hearing, and there has been, some confusion with the distribution of the 3% that's supposed to be, allocated to them. They have some concerns over there, and we'll be delving into that conversation shortly. Mr. Williams, you're welcome to join us.
Thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers.
Great. We'll be talking about the 3% District Assembly Common Fund, but I don't know if the Federation has had an opportunity to rate President Akufo-Addo's, government. I mean, a lot of organizations have had the opportunity to do that. Recently, we heard Imani saying they will rate President Akufo-Addo 4.5. If you are to give a rating, what would it be?
Oh, to be honest with you, if we were to rate the president, I will be doing that personally. The Federation has not yet met to consider such a decision. But generally, we think that things are going on reasonably okay. So an average of 5% of the top of that is not 5%, but between 1 and 10 would give them about a 5 off the top of my head, looking at how things are progressing.
In 2017, when the dust was yet to settle, you raised concerns about the appointment of persons with disability. You wanted to see representation, in government. Now it looks like the dust has settled. We've seen a lot of the appointment come in. Are you satisfied with what you've seen so far?
Unfortunately, where appointments to office of trust or office of authority is concerned, it's been a huge disappointment so far as the disability community is concerned. And simply because we expected some very high profile appointments to by the president to respective ministries. We didn't see that. One of the other things we expected the president to do early in the day, sometime last year, we indicated that what the president should do is actually try and set up a desk at the office of the president for matters pertaining to persons with disabilities, as has been done in some African countries like Senegal, South Africa, among others, or in the alternative, actually elevate the current council from a council to an authority, simply because the council is operating merely as a department under an overpopulated ministry like the Ministry for Gender, Children and Social Protection. All these things fell on the deaf ears of the president after there were diverse means of communicating to him. Very recently, the biggest disappointment has been with the kind of provisions made in the proposed affirmative action bill, where we asked for the affirmative action bill to be absolutely inclusive of matters pertaining to persons with disabilities in all the subject areas that the bill deals with. The only thing that has been done so far as that bill is concerned for persons with disabilities is to assert the right to fertility and childbearing by women with disabilities, which to us we feel is quite unfortunate.
Well, interesting. We'll be coming back to that shortly, and then some issues regarding, the 10-year moratorium on making, buildings disability friendly. We'll come to that. But you have issues about the distribution of the District Assembly, Common Fund. Now, one thing we shouldn't forget is that, the MPP increased it from 2% to 3%. At least that is something good we can talk about. But now the distribution of that particular common fund, you have some concerns with that?
Sure. So I'm glad you put it the way you put it. government ought to be congratulated, NPP administration ought to be congratulated for increasing it from 2% to 3%, because they talk about the increase from 2 to 3 started way back in November 2011. So we're happy that the NPP administration was able to actualize that promise in their manifesto. So we are grateful, but then let's guess what? It was increased for the money to be put to use, and good use for the benefit of persons with disabilities. It is, however, unfortunate that with that good move of increasing it from 2 to 3%, we've actually not had an actualization of the results that the increment was supposed to achieve. There's been a great deal of confusion and a great deal of misfortune around the disbursement of the funds. In the first place, though it was increased during the reading of the first budget under this current administration in 2017, disbursements was held on to until from late 2016 until ending of late January 2018. And since the money was disbursed to the various accounts of district assemblies from late January, most of the district assemblies have refused to actually disburse the money to persons with disabilities, based on reports we have received from the various districts. In addition to that, during the disbursement late January, the Common Fund Administrator attached what you consider as some advisory notes by way of the kind of items that should be purchased by the funds. Now, some of the districts have also taken these items as basically law by which they would solely abide. So we've had a situation where in districts where they've commenced disbursement of the funds, they are refusing to disburse the money to people whose needs have not been catered for per the list that was attached. So what the Common Fund Administrator did last year was to hold on to the disbursement of the funds and do some head count so far as persons with disabilities available in various districts are concerned, and then also take note of certain needs of theirs. Now, she chronicled these needs during the disbursement of the funds to say these are some of the stipulated needs of persons with disabilities. What the district assemblies have done is taking the chronicled needs as law to say once your needs do not fall within the chronicled needs that has been handed over to us, we are not going to disburse any funds to you. So we've had farmers, for instance, call us and complain that they are not being dealt with, which is very unfortunate. In addition to that, the Common Fund Administrator, in a communication or a meeting with MMDCs in Kumasi sometime earlier this year, indicated that they were not supposed to disburse the funds to people under 18 and over 60 years. That has also come with its own great deal of confusion, because we say that in the first place, it might have been a comment of hers, but it was an uninformed comment, because you cannot say persons with disabilities over 60 or under 18 should not benefit from the Common Fund. What does the Common Fund tend to serve? What purpose does it serve? It is by far and large for economic empowerment, issues of facilitating access to education and access to good health. And persons who are under 18 and over 60 also tend to access health, education, and matters of economic empowerment. Persons with disabilities in particular, because of the discrimination they have suffered over the years, even for those over 60, tend to have a great deal of need for issues of economic empowerment. With the comment that she passed, some of the districts again have taken this as a law and have simply refused to allow people who do not fall within the age category specified to also benefit.
I would like to continue, but I've also seen, from I've read from the tabloids also, the administrator herself, Madam Natoshi Addo, saying that for people who are above 60 years, for instance, they fall within the category of the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program. So really, if you make these funds accessible, to them, the district assemblies make these funds accessible to them, then it means they'll take what is for the disability community and also take from the, from LEAP. And that really is unfair. That's the argument that I've heard from her.
Yeah, actually, I was going to come to that argument, so I'm happy you've asked the question. I think I've also overheard Irene say so, but that is absolutely wrong. Because in the first place, looking at the kind of funds that get to people under the LEAP program, persons, the nature of persons with disabilities conditions are not considered in disbursing LEAP. So LEAP has a fixed amount that is disbursed over a period of time. So if you are giving someone like Maxwell 100 cedis to depend on for the next 2 to 3 months, and you give that same to Alexander to depend on as a blind person, it is woefully inadequate, because owing to my disability, I incur high cost of living. For instance, if you had to go to the market, you would get up and simply go to the market. I would have to go with someone else, meaning I will bear the cost of my transportation and the cost of that person's transportation. I would have to bear the cost of maintaining that person as well. So LEAP doesn't solve it. LEAP is only an enhancing feature of an attempt to economically empower persons with disabilities. Now, there are people who are over 60 who are engaged in petty trading. Those people need better funding than what LEAP can offer. And that is what the Common Fund offers to such persons, the opportunity to get some better form of funding to economically empower them, so as to ensure that they support themselves and their dependents. So I think the Common Fund Administrator completely had it wrong. And our engagement with the Minister in charge of Gender, Children and Social Protection also has it that indeed the ministry has not agreed to any such arrangements.
Wow. Interesting. But I want to find out, so what is the case now if you, for persons with disability when they are going in for their money? What exactly is happening now? Can you paint a picture of what is happening on the ground?
Okay, so prior to the current disbursement, we've had, since 2010, we've had the Common Fund, establishing the Common Fund guidelines, establishing a fund management team. What the process was prior to was that persons needing to access some component of the fund apply to the fund management team, and then they go through the process of approval and then disburse. What is happening today is that most of the fund management teams have been rendered redundant or non-functional, because the district assemblies are simply holding on to the chronicled or what they deem as a checklist of needs of persons with disabilities in the district, so far as the Common Fund Administrators list is concerned, and saying, look, if what you are requesting is not on this list, you are not getting it. So we have our people in the district. First of all, the Common Fund, I keep on saying this, pardon me. It's actually the fund management teams are currently being ignored. That is the first thing that is happening. In other districts where they are not being ignored, the MMDCs are simply refusing to allow them access to the existing funds that have been disbursed because of the prevailing confusion. There are other MMDCs that are making demands of the Common Fund for Persons with Disabilities that are nowhere near what the Common Fund for Persons with Disabilities should be doing. So there is a myriad of confusion out there now. That is why persons with disability, led by the Ghana Federation of Disability Organizations, are requesting a dialogue with the Minister of Local Government and other key stakeholders, an immediate dialogue to settle this confusion. And it's unfortunate that we were not listened to way back in January, because we did say at the time that there were several confusions around the disbursement of the funds, and if we're not careful, we're only going to stoke the fire, and this is just what has happened.
Now, you talk about a list. Are you able to tell us what exactly is on the list and what has been taken away?
No, for the list, after they did a head count and a chronicling of the needs of persons with disabilities, there are all kinds of things on the list. Freezers, hair dryers, barbering machines, among several, sewing machines, among several others. But the fact is that the list is not exhaustive. And the list is not exhaustive because at the time of asking me what my needs were, if I told you, oh, I needed a freezer to operate, I might have said I needed a freezer to operate without taking into cognizance the fact that I would need a facility at which I will place the freezer. That facility must have electricity, among other things, and it also must have security. So if you present the freezer to me and I tell you these are the additional things I need, and you tell me it is not on the list, it will not be serving the purpose. That is why we say, indeed, the fund management committee should be made to do or perform the function for which they were actually established, ensuring that they receive applications, conduct a good assessment of the needs of the individual, and then disperse the funds accordingly. No one is saying, if for instance I have requested to buy a freezer, and for good reasons the fund management committee wants to facilitate the purchasing of the freezer, so be it. But they should ensure that that freezer is going to serve the need for which it was applied.
Well, so we have to go on to have the issues, but we know that the Ghana Federation of the Disabled and all the concerns they are raising will be taken up, and Maxwell Agbagba had been doing some great work already speaking to them, but we'll try and bring you more highlights subsequently on regular programming on the channel.